Our first guest tonight is a United States Senator from Vermont. Please welcome back to the show, Senator Bernie Sanders. How are you, Senator?
I'm great, Seth. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. I want to thank you. Back in 2020, March 2020, our first show that we did remotely, you were my first guest then. You were very dependable in our time of need. So I'm mostly just disappointed we keep having times of need, but thank you for continuing to show up for us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
We just went through a time of the year where a lot of people had vacation, took a little time off. You don't strike me as someone who uses their downtime to relax.
Well, in a sense, I don't. These are, Seth, really tough times for our entire country. I think maybe the most difficult times in our lifetimes, and we got to recognize that. And I'm a senator, and I got work to do, and I've got to do it. I think this COVID thing is driving everybody crazy. I know you had to deal with it yourself, and we're worried about the kids, and we're worried about isolation and mental health and stress and jobs and everything else. And, we're fighting now to preserve American democracy. Hopefully there'll be a vote in the Senate in a week, which will override Republican efforts to suppress the votes and impose extreme gerrymandering. And we've got to deal with climate change, and we got to deal with oligarchy and income and wealth inequality. So, these are tough times for the country. And I think hopefully we're going to get over this crisis sooner than later and move this country in a direction that it has to go.
One of the toughest things facing Democrats is a razor thin margin, not a lot of wiggle room within your caucus. Joe Manchin obviously has an outsized influence with what is or isn't going to get passed. Build Back Better, Democrats failed to pass it. It doesn't seem like Joe Manchin has a lot of interest in working on it anymore. Is it now officially dead? We've heard a lot of times over the past year that it was dead. Is now there any optimism on your end?
Well, this is one of the issues where we have got to involve the American people in doing exactly what they want. Nobody knows what's in Build Back Better. They see a big word out there, phrase. But what it is about is finally demanding that the wealthiest people in this country start paying their fair share of taxes. Overwhelming support for that in the midst of income and wealth inequality. We want to lower the cost of prescription drugs because we pay the highest prices in the world. People say, do it. We want to expand Medicare to cover dental, hearing aids, eyeglasses, overwhelming support, childcare, climate change, and the need to create millions of jobs as we transform our energy system, affordable housing, making schools more affordable. So all of these issues are enormously popular. And what we have got to do is create a resonance with the American people that demands Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema and everybody else, not to mention Republicans, start doing what the American people want rather than what wealthy campaign contributors or the big money interest wants. Seth, one of the things that has not really been talked about by the media very much, which is really, really quite extraordinary, is that the big money interests, and I'm talking about the drug companies, the insurance companies, the fossil fuel industry, and the very wealthy, are spending hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars right now to make sure that Congress does not do what the American people want them to do. And that talks about a corrupt political system, but it also talks about the need for the American people to stand up and demand that Congress represent their interest and not just the 1%.
I know you've spent a lot of time in a state like West Virginia, and I think an argument can be made that Joe Manchin understands the voters of that state really well to be a Democratic senator in a state that voted so overwhelmingly for Donald Trump, even though these are things that would undeniably benefit the voters of West Virginia. How do you try to influence someone who turns around and can say, trust me, I know how this state works better than the rest of you?
Well, I'm sure he does know his own state very well. In 2016, when I was running for president, I think I won every county in that state. And you got it in West Virginia, so I know that state a little bit. And you got a state which is really struggling economically. It's an older state. It's a state where you have one economic crisis, the opioid crisis after another. So if you're asking me point blank, do I think that the people In West Virginia, want to expand Medicare to cover dental, eyeglasses, and hearing aids. I think they do. Do they want to make sure that the wealthy start paying their fair share of taxes? Yeah, I believe they do. They got childcare crisis. They got the whole same problems that every other state in this country faces. So why Senator Manchin holds the views he does, I'm not quite sure. But to be honest with you, I do not think that they reflect where the working families of West Virginia are.